Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is actually not Marc McMain. This is his friend Taylor Hawkins. So excited to be filling in for Marc as he is running his campaign for Senate. Glad you joined us. We're taking a break from the music to bring you some interesting and engaging content to brighten your day and make you a more informed individual. Just to give you a quick outline of what we'll be covering today, we're going to start off by covering some current events, some news, things that are happening both nationally as well as right here at home in Georgia. Then we're going to get to a discussion of a topic I have been thinking about for quite some time, the crisis of masculinity in America. What is happening to men and boys? I know if you're a functioning adult out there, you've thought about this, especially if you have boys of your own. There's a problem happening. And then we're going to get to a conversation between myself and a good friend of mine, Cole Porter, who is an awesome business owner and just a guy who's truly demonstrated success across multiple facets of his life. You know, no life is a success in every area all the time. So don't believe that. Genuine people have struggles. But Cole's one of those who definitely lives his life well. And so I look forward to having that conversation with Cole at the end of our segment, the last half of this hour. So thank you for joining us. Again, this is the Marc McMain Show. Taylor Hawkins filling in. So let's get right into it. Some current events. We're going to start with some great news here in Georgia. As of March 20th, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has signed legislation to suspend our state's gas tax for 60 days to combat the high gas prices that everyone is seeing at the pump. This, in fact, removes approximately 33 cents per gallon for regular gas, about 37 cents for diesel. And this move intended to provide some immediate relief from the the cost inflation we're seeing due to the Iran war. It's expected to save drivers about $5 per fill-up, and that's, you know, if you're the kind of guy like me who puts a lot of miles on the road, then I know that matters to you as well. So again, the duration of that gas tax suspension is about 2 months, 60 days from March 20th, and it's going to save you about 33 cents a gallon on regular gas and 37 cents a gallon on diesel. Now, this is a major move, and I think it points back to why I believe so passionately in conservative governance. Every time we suspend the gas tax here in Georgia, it costs the state about $100 million in revenue. So it is no joke to take this kind of action. It takes gumption, and I really appreciate our governor stepping up to do that. Speaking of our governor, who is an awesome individual, by the way, someone I know personally and have had the opportunity to work with in my political exploits in the last few years, you have the opportunity, if you live within the sound of my voice, you have the opportunity to come hear Brian Kemp. The governor will be a key speaker at the Walton County GOP Barbecue, which is coming up on April 23rd. April 23rd here in Walton County, Georgia. If you're interested in that, come and hear the governor. There'll be a lot of other elected officials and people who are running for office here in our great state. Why don't you go to WaltonCountyGOP.com and check out the tickets if you're a business owner and you're interested in sponsorship, setting up a table, getting to know the great folks in Walton County. It's always a great time. We have people from, honestly, all across the 10th District here in Northeast Georgia. So I highly recommend you come here, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, and come join us at the Walton County Barbecue. Again, that web address is WaltonCountyGOP.com. Well, the biggest thing hitting the news really nationally is that we have dispatched American troops to the Strait of Hormuz, to the engagement with Iran. Now, what this is not engaging in major boots-on-the-ground efforts. This is not, starting the next stage of some forever war. You're going to have a lot of people saying that. You already hear that. Honestly, those people are not people who deal with the truth. They're people who want to weaponize your fear to control the narrative. So don't listen to those people. What this is, these are going to be targeted operations, likely with the primary goal of opening the Strait of Hormuz. And that ties right back into what we were just talking about with the cost of gas. About 20% of the world's total petroleum liquid, which is roughly 20 million barrels a day, flows through the Strait of Hormuz. So if you've been that guy thinking, why does this strait matter so much? Why am I hearing this so much on the news, right, Chastity?
That's right.
It's been on the news all over the place, and not everybody has to keep up with everything that's happening internationally, but that's why. 1/3 of all global seaborne traded oil comes through that strait. So it's the major choke point for the Persian Gulf, and the reality is that Iran controls the islands right around the strait that are key to controlling the strait. And so if we can take over some of those islands, we can wrestle control away from the radical Iranian regime, and that puts us in a much better strategic position. It also makes sure that we can better control the cost of oil, which right now is running away. Now, again, just for some greater perspective, this is not Karg Island. You've heard probably, if you've been listening to the news, heard a lot about Karg Island. That one is key for oil. That's where the Iranian regime sends all of its oil for refinement. But that's not the Abu Musa Islands. And those are the ones that America most needs to take control of right there around the strait. So hopefully that helps you stay informed as to what's happening, what's going on over there. And the reality is that oil is actually still at relatively normal levels. I mean, the cost has increased. We are seeing it at the pump. But in spite of all that's happened so far, oil has actually not even reached its peak under Barack Obama yet. A New York Times columnist yesterday pointed out that in the year that President Obama was coasting to re-election, that's March of 2012, the price of crude oil closed around $123 a barrel, which is actually a whopping $175 a barrel in today's money. And y'all, despite this war, the price of crude right now is right around $100 a barrel today. That's only slightly above the inflation-adjusted average since 2001. So I say that not to act like the cost increases you're seeing at the pump are not important. They are important. But I think it gives necessary perspective and helps everybody kind of calm down. The time to panic about the impact of this war is not yet. We haven't even approached the levels in terms of gas cost and oil price that we treated as only slightly abnormal about a decade ago. So some people are trying to weaponize the panic over this cost of oil increase to make you think we're in the middle of some massive foreign policy fiasco. They want to tell you the Trump administration is being led by Israel's best interest instead of America's, and they want to use fear about your cost at the pump to drive that narrative. So don't believe them. Don't give way to panic. This is not a big problem. In terms of American lives lost, of course, 13 is a tragic number. Every life lost is a tragedy because every life is sacred. But there have actually been more people killed in Chicago, Illinois in the last 4 weeks than have been killed in this war with Iran.
Wow.
It's a startling statistic that'll help you kind of put things in perspective, I think. Don't listen to the mainstream media that wants you to think we're losing, that wants you to think, again, that we're in the middle of some kind of disaster. There are people in the media who want to see our president humiliated, and if it means cheering on the deaths of our soldiers or overlooking the deaths of American citizens at home and the proper proportionality there, they're willing to do it. And that's sad, it's sick, but again, it's yet another encouragement not to believe everything you hear. Meanwhile, Israel is moving as fast as possible to dissect and destroy the ability of the Iranian military in the next few months. They are flying nonstop missions over the nation of Iran to try to take out their military installations as fast as possible. They are, of course, concerned with the potential for a ceasefire happening too soon. And it's interesting to see who's on their side, because Saudi Arabia fully agrees with Israel, and they've joined Israel in their pressure on the Americans to see our president continue the campaign to make sure we take radical Iran's ability to terrorize the region away from them. Saudi Arabia does not want a destabilized radical Iran. They want Iran, you know. I kind of say it both ways. You'll have to forgive the lack of similarity there, but honestly, I don't really know how Americans should say it. But anyway, Iran is continuing their propaganda war by lying to their people, claiming victory. They're claiming the total destruction of enemy forces within their borders, which honestly is truly farcical. But in response to that, Tel Aviv residents spent most of the last 48 hours in bomb shelters as Iran is retaliating against Israel with heavy ballistic missile strikes. And it's sad to see, but it again highlights the radicalism of the Iranian regime as they're indiscriminately bombing civilians in Israel. They're not targeting military installations as America and our allies in the Gulf region are. Multiple barrages from ballistic missiles yesterday alone, and Iran continues their aggression against our allies in the region. So all that to be said, we are doing our best between ourselves and our allies to force Iran to come to the negotiating table, force them to give up all of the things that we want them to give up. And the president has been clear on the things that are a bare minimum. He said that there should never be a nuclear war ever allowed. The concessions he's seeking from the Iranians include removing all enriched uranium, dismantling all 3 of their nuclear sites, limiting their ballistic missile capabilities to defense purposes only, and opening the Strait of Hormuz. That's just 4 or 5 of the president's top 15 concessions he is seeking from Iran. And initially, officials from Iran denied they had received any such plan for peace. But yesterday, Wednesday, the 25th, they did acknowledge that Iran has received that, and they rejected it. But they're also privately indicating they'd be willing to continue peace negotiations privately with the United States. So there's a lot of mix-up happening still. It's important, I think, to kind of be aware of what's going on. But I think as I mentioned already, we are far from any sort of state of panic about the situation in the war. I think that the president is doing a phenomenal job over there. Here at home, however, there is more to be concerned about. I mentioned it last week, but I've got more details for you this week, that the continued DHS funding being blocked by Democrats in Congress we're feeling that here at home. In almost every major airport across the nation, we are seeing massive TSA agent call-outs, which are causing huge delays for citizens just trying to live their life as normal, get about their business, and that is a massive problem. And the reality is, of the last 175 days, so it's 175 days in the current federal fiscal year, which actually starts October 1st, DHS has been in a state of shutdown for 85 of those 175 days. So while this particular shutdown is only just past, I think it's 43 days, DHS in total has been in shutdown conditions for 85 of those days. And the reason I bring that up is because national Democrats once again are playing politics with the paychecks of key public servants. And that is now having a massive impact on airports around the country. There are some lines that are as long as 6 to 8 hours at some major airports. There are some specific airports that have seen as high as a 50% call out of the TSA agents that work there. Over 400, I think it's closer to 500 now, TSA agents have quit outright during this partial shutdown. They got to feed their families. So they have to find some way to make a living, and so the federal government has called in ICE to major airports across the country to make sure that some of this backlog caused by the TSA agent call-outs can be fixed. I'm very grateful for that personally. Of course, I have a story that kind of highlights the problems, but also thankful for ICE agents. I dropped my sister off at the airport this morning. She is going to Central America to do some missions work, and very grateful for the work that she does down there. But the reason I mention that is because she usually can get through security in the Atlanta airport in an hour, maybe sometimes hour and a half tops. And today it took her 3.5 hours, and that's even, she has the Clear Plus upgrade that enables her to bypass some of the lines. It took her 3.5 hours. And so it's just sad to see the Democrats continue to play politics with the funding proposals of the Department of Homeland Security that keep people safe here at home. Another thing I wanted to mention, a couple things real quick before we go to our first commercial break. Here at home, here in Georgia, Speaker John Burns, just to give you some Capitol updates, we are only a couple weeks away from the end of legislative session here in Georgia. And so I personally think the short session we have in Georgia, only 40 days, is a good thing. Make sure there's only the good stuff gets done, only the stuff that's of high importance gets done. Governor Kemp, of course, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, he signed new tax relief legislation in the past few days, which continues a central theme that the GOP-controlled House and Senate here in Georgia are building, which is the broader push to return surplus revenue to us taxpayers. I think that's a good thing. I think it's definitely one of the defining political priorities of this year, and it's actually also a major election year message for Republicans. I think it's a help to make sure that as we're seeing cost of living increases, as we're still dealing with the tail end of the effects of the inflation of the Biden era, I think affordability is one of the main things that federal and local and state officials need to be focused on. Another thing that passed is a high school phone ban bell to bell in high schools across the state, which follows up on a measure passed last year, which banned cell phone use by students in K through 8th grade. Now you're going to see it in 9th through 12th grade as well. I personally think that's a very positive thing. We need to make sure schools are focused on education, not distraction. And then finally, Georgia House Speaker John Burns is pushing to save his literacy bill, which would fund early reading initiatives, literacy coaches in every school across Georgia, and a variety of other things. So a lot of things happening here in Georgia, a lot of things happening across the nation to be aware of, and we want to make sure that you are the most informed out of your friends. So if these things are interesting to you, hey, take a deep dive into any of these subjects, but hopefully this has been some helpful stuff to keep you informed. Now we're going to go pay some bills, and we'll be right back. Folks, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show. Taylor Hawkins filling in for Mark on this beautiful Thursday afternoon.
Spring is right around the corner. New beginnings, fresh starts, and big moments. If you're thinking about proposing, if you're ready to take the next step, you go to P&A Jewelers. For 50 years, families have trusted P&A Jewelers to celebrate life's most important milestones. Proudly second-generation, family-owned and operated by brother and sister, we specialize in stunning engagement rings and custom designs made just for you. P&A Jewelers, located at 4665 Atlanta Highway next to Quick Trip in Loganville.
Storm damage can shorten the life of your roof, and here at Joshua 19 Roofing, we make sure your home stays protected. We're more than just a roofing company serving Georgia. We're committed Christians called to serve God by helping others. After this year's wind and hail storms, we've helped dozens of homeowners just like you start the insurance process for full roof replacements. Visit Joshua19roofing.com or call 706-471-1567 to schedule your completely free roof inspection. And mention the Marc McMain Show for a $150 credit towards qualifying roofs. That's Joshua19roofing.com.
Recently, I was on a flight writing on a legal pad, and the man next to me struck up a conversation. "Are you an author?" he asked. I said, "No, I'm actually a preacher." Well, the look on his face was priceless. How would you feel if you're stuck sitting next to a preacher for several hours? Surprisingly, though, we had a good conversation. He asked me several questions about Jesus, and I told him that the Bible says if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Christianity is worthless. Ever thought about that? You see, the truthfulness of Christianity hinges on whether Jesus died and rose from the grave. There's great evidence for it, and I'm one of the billions of Christians around the globe who believes that the resurrection really happened. If Jesus did conquer death, then he's worthy of your trust. If he didn't, reject him because he's a fraud. I believe he really conquered death. What do you believe? This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
For devotions, visit rightfromtheheart.org.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Marc McMain Show. I'm Taylor Hawkins, your host, filling in for Mark, who is running a great race for Senate right now. I'm with Joshua 19, and this segment is sponsored by Joshua 19 Roofing. Great company. Give us a look over at Joshua19roofing.com. But I am going to talk right now about something that has been on my mind, quite frankly, for years, but it's something I've been thinking a lot more about recently. One of the things I love to do is mentor young men who are younger than me or who are at a place in life where I can help speak into their life. And I think it's important because I think one of the things that we are seeing in our nation is a crisis of masculinity. I think something has gone deeply wrong with what it means to be a man in America today. Our culture's ideal of masculinity is completely adrift. We have no kind of shared role model to look to where there's unity in our culture about what a good man looks like. And because of that, we see young men floating between extremes. You've got the one side, you've got the soft, kind of gentle guy who's super in touch with his feminine side. He's kind of all feelings and no backbone. On the other side, you've got loud alpha bro types who are chasing likes, clicks, muscles, and women while they're actually dodging any real responsibility. I think anytime we turn on the TV, anytime you scroll on your phone, ask yourself how many grounded, solid examples of real manhood do we all agree on anymore? I think the answer is almost none. I think our culture is having a very hard time agreeing on what a good man looks like or how he acts. And right here at home in our towns, the rural places where we live, sometimes it's even worse. Mentorship, real mentorship, has all but dried up. Dads, coaches, uncles, the people who used to take young men under their wing and mentor them, provide an example for what it looks like to be a good man. Now those community ties are wearing thin, families are splitting, and I think too many young men end up isolated, angry, and alone. And honestly, not just young men. But this is leading to division in our country, and I think a lot of men are lacking direction as well. The problem is that this absence of a shared role model, the absence of any kind of unity on what manhood looks like, I know you've heard it described in podcasts and other things, but it's not just some culture war talking point. It's something that we're feeling every day. It's leaving your sons without a roadmap. It's leaving your daughters without good men to build a life with. And it's leaving our country weaker. This is a big problem. But I do think that there's a better way. I think there's a better way. It's one that our forebears, previous generations in our countries knew, and it's one that's rooted in faith, virtue, and sacrifice. So today I want to talk a little bit about why and how masculinity has drifted and how we want to get it back. First, let's look at the damage. 1 in 4 American children, that's nearly 19 million kids, are growing up without a dad in the home. 40% of all babies born in this country come into the world without a married mom and dad. For women under 30, it's even worse. That number's closer to 50%. And the numbers don't lie. These are not just sad statistics. Those are boys who are far more likely to drop out, far more likely to use drugs, to commit crimes, and then to repeat this cycle of failure. That's why these numbers matter. And you see kind of 3 broken models, I think, that have taken over. Because of the lack of a real role model, these broken models kind of have become a stand-in. First, you got the alpha male gym bro type. These are people like Andrew Tate, the fresh and fit crowd online. These are people who promise that muscles and money and women bring all that you need for happiness. These are the guys who look tough on camera, but in reality, they're just chasing cheap applause while running away from real sacrifice. Some of their diagnoses of the problems we face are accurate. All of their prescriptions for what young men should do to build true success are absolutely wrong. Then you got the feminine male extreme. These are the guys who are far too gentle, who are not strong, who have not been shown what it means to lead with integrity or to be fierce in all the right ways. They're kind of aping feminine traits and just in many ways leaning away from true masculinity. These are the guys who are avoiding conflict. These guys who are avoiding leadership. And then they're kind of wondering, well, why is everyone's respect for me disappearing? Well, there's a reason for that. But I honestly think the one that might be hurting most young men right now is the passive male. These are the failure to launch guys, kind of glued to their phone, glued to video games, failing to actually get a real job that's meaningful, failing to move into his 20s or 30s with direction. I talked to a dad just last week whose 28-year-old son lives in his basement, spends most of his days gaming and watching stuff he knows he shouldn't, and then he gets mad when he's asked to mow the lawn or, cut down a few tree branches. And to be honest with you, that dad looked broken. He told me he doesn't even know how to reach his son anymore, and that is sad. I've also talked to good young women in their 20s and 30s right here in our community who say the same thing every time. Where are the guys worth marrying? Where are the guys who show up? Where are the guys who work hard, who open the door for ladies? Where are the young men who are secure in who they are, who aren't chasing one identity crisis after another? Too many guys their age are still living like boys. They're still pursuing screens over responsibility. They're still chasing cheap thrills over real commitment. So what happened? Well, we traded real manhood for these counterfeits we're discussing. And let me give it to you straight. God designed men for a purpose. And those of you who work with your hands, those of you who especially work with tools, you know that the designer of a tool gets to choose how that tool works. Well, God knows exactly what the template of manhood is because he built us. He built Adam in the garden, and he said, your goal, your commission, if you will, is to work and keep. We need to shoulder the burden for others. Men are called to guard what's precious. Protect your wife, protect your children, step up for your community. These things are not toxic, like our culture says. The culture wants to act like anyone who's a real man is exercising some kind of quote-unquote toxic masculinity. This is more about purpose. Passivity is the oldest male failure, and it's everywhere today. The Bible spells it out plainly in 1 Corinthians 16:13. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong, and let all that you do be done in love. watchfulness, vigilance, firmness in your faith, steadfastness, faithfulness. This is strong manhood. And everything that you're doing be done in love. That sacrificial seeking of the good of another, that's the way we emulate God. That's the way we step into our calling as men. The fix for this problem is pretty simple. And the founders of this country knew it too. A free country only works if men first govern themselves internally with virtue, with self-control, putting their family and their country before their own comfort. And to be honest with you guys, I think this starts with a relationship with Jesus Christ. He's the ultimate example of strength that sacrifices. Real manhood is built on virtue. It's built on honesty when no one's watching, self-control when temptation hits. It's built on courage to do the right thing even when it costs you. And the reality of Christianity is that Jesus Christ is there for you to be the man that you can't be. You need to step into this fight instead of scrolling past it. When a man lives this way, personal fulfillment, real fulfillment floods in. You start sleeping better. You start standing taller. You will actually start to like the man in the mirror. And the public success that you're seeking will follow. You'll become the guy that employers trust. You'll become the person your neighbors can rely on and that our communities really actually need. You'll become, if you're a young man looking for a wife, you'll become marriageable. Steady, faithful men who are able to lead themselves well and lead in their community are marriageable, and that's a good thing. Real impact happens when you put down the toys, put down the applause, and shoulder the burden. The best description of masculinity I have heard is the glad assumption of self-sacrificial responsibility, and that's so true. So guys, America's best days aren't behind us. We can return to the manhood that built this country, sacrificial, faithful, strong under God. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. Dads, start being the example that your boys need. Young men, start small today. Get in the Word daily. Find an older man at your church or in your town to mentor you. Put the phone down, pick the real work up. Fix something, coach a team, serve at the food bank. Do hard things. That is how you really shoulder the burden. That is how you step into your calling as manhood, as a man. Manhood is the glad assumption of self-sacrificial responsibility. We're going to continue this conversation with Cole Porter, my good friend from Gwinnett, who's built an awesome company around just some of these ideals we've mentioned in a few minutes. So please stick around, folks. Join us in just a few minutes. We're going to pay some bills and be right back.
Lake Life is the Lake area's largest award-winning magazine, reaching over 25,000 readers. Pick up your copy of Lake Life magazine today. Get Lake Life free at over 100 convenient locations in Georgia's Lake Country. And keep in mind, you'll receive your free copy with a subscription to the Lake Oconee News or the Eatonton Messenger. Lake Life. It's all about the lives and events in Georgia's Lake Country. Call 706-485-3501 to subscribe. Lake Life, the biggest, the best, and it's free.
Storm damage can shorten the life of your roof, and here at Joshua 19 Roofing, we make sure your home stays protected. We're more than just a roofing company serving Georgia. We're committed Christians called to serve God by helping others. After this year's wind and hail storms, we've helped dozens of homeowners just like you start the insurance process for full roof replacements. Visit joshua19roofing.com or call 706-471-1567 to schedule your completely free roof inspection. And mention the Marc McMain Show for $150 credit towards qualifying roofs. That's joshua19roofing.com.
Have you been putting off auto repairs? Do you want a body shop you know and trust? Go see Auto Correct Collision. Auto Correct is a family-owned and operated collision center with over 45 years of experience. Their equipment and training exceed industry standards. No repair is too big or small. Ask about the special drawings and mention this ad for a discount. Visit Auto Correct Collision at 409 Mayfield Drive or call them at 770-207-1241.
If you're in the construction business, you're going to need a dumpster at some point in time, and that's why you need to call Atha Equipment Rental in Monroe, now offering 20 and 30-yard cans. Atha Equipment Rental now offers a complete line of landscape and construction equipment like tools, trenchers, floor sanders, jackhammers, and so much more, like rentals for your parties with tables, chairs, popcorn machines, Dunkin' booths, and more. Call Jason Atha at 770-207-6041. That's Atha Equipment Rental on East Spring Street in Monroe.
Welcome back to the Marc McMain Show. This is Taylor Hawkins filling in for Mark. This segment is brought to you by Joshua 19 Roofing. Folks, if you missed us at the last part of the hour, we were talking about the problem with masculinity in America. And I just want to go over a quick few things that I didn't get to touch on before we bring in my friend Cole Porter. I don't want you to think that I am doom and gloom. The examples of men who fulfill the things that we were talking about, the real manhood, those men still exist. They may actually be more common even than you know, but they're definitely more the exception than the rule, and you have to seek them to find them. One of the things I love is the saying that men are like flatbed trucks. They drive straighter with a heavy load. Men need responsibility. One of the problems that we have today is that we have a whole generation that doesn't know where being a boy stops and where being a man starts. It takes men to bestow manhood onto boys. And we're facing a generation of boys who are trying to bestow manhood on other boys. And boys define manhood by the amount they're consuming instead of the amount of responsibility they are assuming. And that's one of the problems. Like I said, men need responsibility, and part of that responsibility is assuming the character roles God has called men to. The character of a warrior, of a builder, of a priest, of a king. So these things are important because that's how God has built men. And if you step into these roles, if you step into the role of a protector, a warrior called to fight, not for yourself, but against passivity, weakness, and evil, both in your life and in the world, you're going to be a better man. If you step into your role as a builder, someone who can create and produce in this world, take responsibility for building something that benefits others, then you will be able to follow God's example, create order out of chaos, and see the impact you can have on the world. If you follow God's model of being a priest, someone who is called to lead spiritually, guiding yourself and others towards God through personal spiritual responsibility, example, and sacrifice, you are going to experience more meaning in your life. And finally, if you follow God's role model of a king, a servant king who is called to lead and govern responsibly, use authority well, not for yourself, but for the good of those around you, and with a mindset of stewardship instead of domination, then you will see your impact flourish. And so these things are so important because masculinity is in crisis, masculinity is challenged, and we need a generation of young men and older men alike who conscientiously take a look in the mirror, who are willing to be honest with themselves about where they are and where they've gone wrong, and then intentionally build towards the kind of men they want to be. Again, not just for yourself. You will experience the benefits yourself, but ultimately because God wants you to shoulder those responsibilities and impact others and the world around you. Well, now we have the opportunity to talk to someone very special, a friend of mine, Cole Porter. He's a guy who's built something very special, owns a steel fabrication company that I believe, if I got it right, Cole, your father started this. Is that right?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Taylor.
Yes, sir.
He started the company back in '83, so it's been around a while. And I've been involved I've been running the company for the last 6 or 7 years. And now I own it for the last 3.
Well, Cole, something I so appreciate about you is that I've seen the way that you've led your company with what I believe is a lot of intentionality. Not just in the way that you do business, but also in the way that you handle your people, in the way that you pour into them. I've seen, at least from the outside looking in, it truly looks like you're a very thoughtful leader, somebody who's adopted responsibility. So I want to talk today about, what led you to make those kind of investments, what led you to make, those kind of leadership decisions. So if you don't mind, give us a quick short story about yourself. How did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, well, I think that I never really imagined that I would be in the position or role that I'm in. I never really aspired to be, working in the family business as a younger child or even young man. And so it came down to just the opportunity to lead people and the potential that I saw in the company and in the people that were a part of the company and what we could do with some vision, casting that I just had on my heart, I guess. And so it's been, it has been intentional. It hasn't been perfect. And, I know that the outside looking in can be different than the internal experience sometimes, but I think that's part of kind of like what your previous segment was as far as, I think leading with humility and kind of putting your weakness out there is is important, because I think if we project that we've got it figured out, that it's perfect, and that, there's nothing wrong with us, that's one of the things that people will use to say, well, this is toxic masculinity, because they're presenting this whole big and bad picture, but really on the inside there's all these issues, right? And so I think that humility piece is really important, and not to be very proud of what we've accomplished, but maybe proud of the God-given ideas that we are brave enough to go after, right?
It's so true. It's so true. I do think there's a healthy balance to be sought there, because some men misunderstand humility, and they don't end up sharing what they've done or the principles of success with the next generation. They lack that mentorship piece of being willing to say, hey, these are the good decisions I've made, and these are the benefits that have resulted. But I think one thing that you mentioned at the beginning of what you just said, vision casting, is so important. I really believe that's a key part of leadership, and servant leadership especially, because I think that phrase has been a little overused and maybe misunderstood by our culture. It doesn't mean that the person who is leading has to do all of the menial tasks, but it means that you serve those who you are leading best by putting your own ego aside, by leading them with humility, but by making the hard decisions that leadership demands. And I think when you do that with intentionality, when you do that with humility, then you end up seeing a tremendous positive impact. Do you think that's true, and do you think you've seen those things in your business?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think one thing that we really wanted to implement when I started managing the company and eventually becoming president and then purchasing the company was, we wanted to have values, right, that we could hold ourselves to and every employee to, and we wanted a mission that we could do that as well. And so our mission is simply to change lives and lead by example, and it has nothing to do with steel, but we think that we can accomplish that by doing steel really well. And our values, ownership, integrity, partnership, and fail forward, and we really crafted those, around the idea that fail forward is my favorite one, because it's the acknowledgement that we will fail. We will try new things and we will not do them well all the time. But we're not going to settle for mediocrity when we do fail. We're going to learn from our mistakes. And we've got to own our mistakes if we're ever going to learn from them, And so, I try to remind my people that, hey, I'm chief among you when it comes to mistakes made and decisions that were not the best. But I commit to you that I will fail forward and learn from them. Because we've grown so much, we've grown like 500% over like 6 years. So, it's a very different company every year. And when we have a very different company, you're going to do new things and new processes, and you're not going to do them right all the time. And the processes we implement aren't going to be the right ones all the time. And so, trying to figure that out, there has to be room for failure, or else there's just shame everywhere, right? And so there has to be room for failure, but there also has to be a lot of room and expectation of accountability. And I think, when I think about your previous segment on masculinity, which it's so on my heart too, because I think that we have so many leaders, quote unquote, that, whether they're political or whether they're, celebrities or social media, whatever, that they project this certain kind of masculinity or what they would call masculinity. And it's really, coming out of a place of insecurity, like we all have our insecurities. We all have them. I don't care if you're the healthiest person or the most unhealthy person, you have insecurities, and it's whether you are trying to define yourself by them or if you know what your true identity is, right? And so, like in my business, if I look at and this is something I struggle with because, it's a family business. There's legacy there. There's this expectation from, like you said, from the outside looking in, this is how it looks. And so there's this expectation to keep up, and there's these different pressures that you feel as a business owner and a business leader and a community leader, that you have to do things right, or what would they think about you if you didn't do it right, or if you failed, or if something went wrong. And so I can't put my identity in my business, even though that's a place that I have a lot of confidence in. I struggle with saying my identity is that I am the leader of Porter Still. I'm a community leader. I have these people think a lot of me, whatever. But I really have to put my identity in what the Lord thinks about me, and that what He says about me, right? And regardless of my successes or failures, He's going to look at me by the unique creation that He created to do certain things, and so I have to remind myself that constantly. But I think that's really key to the whole masculinity argument: is where is the identity of these people, of these men,
That is so important, folks. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show. This is your host, Taylor Hawkins. We're talking to Cole Porter, my buddy who leads Porter Steel, an incredible steel fabrication company. And we're talking about business success and being a genuine man, a genuine leader in that process. Cole, it's incredible to see what you talked about, that principle, implementing that principle of failing forward, of being willing to fail, willing to take risks, has led to such incredible growth in your company. Over 500% in 6 years is amazing. And I think this comes with something I'd love to maybe even dig a little deeper on, in your opinion, the balance between risk and intentionality, right? Because a lot of people will go to one extreme or the other. They're either very impetuous and they make fast decisions without thinking of what they're breaking or how their actions might impact others, or they might be the super risk-averse type who overthinks everything, overanalyzes. Can you talk about how you have come to learn that balance between intentionality and risk-taking, and how important that is for a leader?
Yeah, I think that, we can't be afraid of risk if we're leading, because, we are the front, right? Like we're the one kind of pushing our way through the jungle and hopefully bringing people along with us. So there's always going to be a snake around the corner or a river that we can't cross or whatever. But so we can't be afraid of the risk, but we've got to have people on our team, I think, that fill in those blind spots. I think that's really key. And if you have that, I think your appetite for risk can grow, because you're not relying on just yourself anymore. I think that's been something that has been key in our process. I also think some of the mistakes that you make when you are too risky come from some of those characteristics that you mentioned earlier about being too passive or being afraid of conflict. Is you've got to hold people accountable when you lead them, and you can't be afraid to hurt their feelings when you hold them accountable, because it's not just in that moment of conflict. It's not just in that moment of, oh gosh, what are they going to think if I come down hard on them, or if I hold them accountable for this bad decision or whatever else, because you're ultimately giving them growth. That's a gift you can give them in the position that you're in. You can give them growth, and who doesn't want that if they're being honest with themselves? And so when you withhold that from somebody, not only does the business suffer, or the endeavor, whatever you're doing, suffer, but giving someone unwarranted trust. If you hold them accountable and you will grow together as an organization, you'll grow together in your relationship. And I think that's really key. And some of the mistakes that we have made have probably been, the mistake really has been, the trusting without accountability and things like that, where that is strength, when you can do that effectively with people and still let them know that you are for them. You're not against them, but you are on their team and you want them to succeed as well.
That's so important. So important. Cole, what about your faith? You're a man who's very open about your faith. How do you think that actually shows up in your day-to-day life and in the leadership you provide to Porter Steel, also the way you show up in your community?
Well, my faith is just, it's just a part of who I am. It's the most important part of who I am, and I believe that God created me in His image, and I believe that also that He gave me calling and purpose. And I think He gives all men and all women calling and purpose. And so I think that's really one of the keys, is actually desiring to know that, to know what that is from Him. And so if I was going to say there's like a first step for me, it's, I'm so purpose-driven, and sometimes I have to tone myself down a little bit from looking too far into the future or too big picture. But, we, I think, as believers have to desire for God to reveal what our calling and purpose is. And I think if we believe that we are created in His image, then we can really compare, what that masculinity looks like to our God. Our God is strong, and He is courageous, and He is truth, but He is not manipulative or intimidating or threatening. He is loving. He's not leading us through those coercive manners or domination. He is leading us through love and through truth and through holding us accountable and through correction and discipline. So, I think that has really been key for me, especially in the conversation that the intro segment, because I'm able to think of these people that I'm like, something's just not right about that masculinity. What is it? And I can say, oh, God is not that. God is not that. But He is that. Some of these qualities are redeemable. But it really helps me to hold that mirror up to myself to say, where am I not reflecting my God where I should be?
It's so powerful. It's so powerful. And men, I mean, this is true in psychological literature as well. Men need something outside of themselves to avoid becoming self-referential, and self-referential individuals tend to become the most destructive human beings, not only themselves,
Right.
but the people around them. And what you just said is so key. I mean, like, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter, kind of shows us what it means to emulate love in a real way. And as men, sometimes the quality of being loving can be overlooked. But I think it's so important to hold that up as a mirror and to say, am I patient? Am I kind? Am I actually the kind of person who someone else could say, that guy's loving? He's actually following the Lord. And I think there's a correlation between both the things you just said, both leading your business well, loving your people in your business well enough to seek their good by not prioritizing their feelings over their need for growth, and also loving your family well enough to show up with patience, to show up with encouragement, show up with that kind of leadership. That's inspirational.
Yeah, and I think you also have to keep in mind that, like, there's one thing to believe something and espouse something, but it's another thing to, like, live it out, right? Like, we're all practicing that. And so I'll be the first one to tell you that I fall short in those areas all the time, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there's grace for that. And I think that it's the progress and not the perfection. If we seek the perfection, we're going to be disappointed, right? But we have a God that loves us very much, loves us like a child, and a father to a child. And we have to remember that He is with us and that He's guiding us, and that there's room for imperfection, and that's what I love about Him so much.
It's so true. Folks, you're listening to a great conversation about masculinity, business, leadership, and all the things that matter for our culture, but also for men. I'm talking to my buddy Cole Porter from Porter Steel in Gwinnett County, fantastic steel fabrication company. This is Taylor Hawkins, and you are listening to The Marc McMain Show. We'll be back right after this brief commercial break.
I'm Rick Jackson. My dad abandoned us. My mom was an alcoholic, so I left the projects. Shoe shining, ticket scalping, vacuum sales. I found purpose in work and built a $3 billion business. Like President Trump, I don't owe anybody anything. And like you, I'm sick of career politicians. I'm running for governor to lead America in criminal deportations, to cut income taxes in half, freeze our insane property taxes, reform the system so that anyone who can work will work, and not just sit around binge-watching Netflix and eating Cheetos. I'll let law enforcement do their job. And if you're caught helping a child change their sex, you're going to jail. I'm Rick Jackson, and I'll get these done. Paid for by Jackson for Governor, Inc.
Storm damage can shorten the life of your roof, and here at Joshua 19 Roofing, we make sure your home stays protected. We're more than just a roofing company serving Georgia. We're committed Christians called to serve God by helping others. After this year's wind and hail storms, we've helped dozens of homeowners just like you start the insurance process for full roof replacements. Visit Joshua19roofing.com or call 706-471-1567 to schedule your completely free roof inspection. And mention the Marc McMain Show for $150 credit towards qualifying roofs. That's Joshua19roofing.com.
Big news, Georgia drivers. DJ's Collision is on the move and is proud to announce their brand new home in Madison. After many years of service in Social Circle, the same team you know and trust is back with a fresh new look and location to serve you best. From flawless paint jobs to complete bodywork, DJ's Collision is where your car gets a second chance to shine. Check out their brand new location in Madison at 1231 Woodcraft Road. That's DJ's Collision. Give them a call at 770-760-8214.
Welcome back, folks. You are listening to The Marc McMain Show. My name is Taylor Hawkins, filling in for Mark, who is, again, running a great Senate race, and so happy to have this opportunity to come to you and talk to you about some very important subjects. And when we left, we were talking about masculinity. And in case you're worried that this might be kind of very man-centered, guys, hopefully most of you are still connected to your family. Most of you still live in the real world. And the reality is that when men fail, women bear the brunt of that. And so I want to continue the conversation, and so don't be afraid to kind of confront the hard truths of where men are at, and don't be afraid of having these kinds of conversations and listening to this kind of content, and being called male-centered for it or whatever. Men are called to lead, and it should be your job as a man to shoulder the responsibility of being the man God has called you to be, so that the women in your life don't suffer if you aren't. I'm talking to my buddy Cole Porter. He is the president and CEO of Porter Steel, fantastic steel fabrication company based in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Cole, when we left, we were talking about the importance of servant leadership and the kind of ways that men need to show up. I want to ask you a question specifically regarding the passivity of not even having these conversations. I think there are a lot of men who recognize that there are problems in their life, maybe in their business, maybe in their family, maybe in their marriage, but so often they lack the initiative or the ownership to even take the first steps forward. So what would you say to a man like that, and what would you say about the importance of taking these steps?
Oh gosh, that is a tough one, because I think that I think it goes back to the calling and purpose piece, because I've talked to a counselor before who's mentioned, what is the version of you you're going to be proud of in 20 years? And that helps you kind of step out of today and your problems or your preoccupations or whatever's going on, and say, like, what do I want my legacy to be? And I think that masculinity, it's leading with authenticity, and it's courage and truth and humility. But I think it's, what legacy are you going to leave, and what is that going to look like to the people around you? And I think that can be a strong inspiration to take that first step, to say, wow, like right now I don't have a legacy. Like, my legacy is that, to use your previous example, I've used my parents' electricity in the basement to watch some stuff and to play some games. What have I done to, like, impact people? And so I think you have to look at the big picture, and that life is important, and we've all been given an allotment of time to be a good steward of. And I love the word stewardship, because whether it's business or whether it's time with people or whether it's our income that we tithe or whatever it is, it's like, how am I being a good steward of what God's given me to make an impact on people with? Because ultimately, if I want to reflect Christ, and I want to reflect what has been done for me in my life, then I've got to take action. I can't just sit there. And I think that's my inspiration, because my faith is so important to me, and I believe it with all of my heart. I think if you don't start from that foundation, it's going to be more difficult, because it's going to be more a self-serving kind of, like, well, how do I want to enjoy life, rather than how do I want to serve others, or how do I want to impact others in life.
And that, what you just said, cuts directly towards something else that I think is so important, which is eliminating distractions, eliminating the things that are keeping you from actually confronting the world around you, and confronting what your life looks like. It's kind of sad, but the reality is that the part of your brain that asks the deepest questions of life, that is literally hardwired by God to question your own meaning and purpose, that part is numbed by overuse of technology. And so we're in a state in our society where people are on their phones 24/7, and the lack of real productive boredom, if you will, the lack of times when we're actually thinking about what's going on in our life and whether or not we're living well, is sapping our ability to become men and women as well, but people who are thoughtful about the legacy that they're leaving for the next generation. So that's, right. I think what you said is so important. Cole, another question I have, feel free to expand on that if you want to, but another question I have is... I was
going to say real quick on that point, I think I would go a step further and say it's really our tendency to escape, right? And like, technology is like our preferred method in our generation for escape. But when we're escaping rather than engaging, I think that's the clue, right? If I'm doing anything to numb out and to escape my present life, of course there's times where we need to divert our minds, and there's stress relief and things like that. But if we're living a lifestyle of escape rather than a lifestyle of engagement, I think that's the key, and 100% what you said, though.
So true, so true. Escapism is so dangerous. But the next question I wanted to, and folks, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show. This is Taylor Hawkins, your host. We've got Cole Porter from Porter Steel on the line. We're talking about all things godly masculinity and business leadership. Cole, are there things, either, I don't know, podcasts or books or even individuals in your life who have helped you in your development of what your thoughts around being a godly man looks like, of being a true leader?
There are a lot of different things. I do love a good book or an audiobook usually, but I listen to a lot of different podcasts. I'm not sure I'll recommend any because I think everyone's a little different. But I think that the book I've read most recently that I think is most appropriate is The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. I just think it's really good to be forthcoming that life is painful and it's not always perfect, but what do you do with that? And so that's been really good. I think that as far as like mentorship, I've had some people in my life that have really spoken to my identity, and that tends to cut through a lot of the haze when you're dealing with problems or issues or even just like character flaws that you have yourself that you're trying to work on. When someone in your life can show you the love of Jesus and can show you grace and can speak to the identity that they see, I think that's very helpful. So I would say that would be my number one goal if I didn't have those people, would be to find people that I can be completely authentic with and that they approach me with grace and love and not fear and you're too much for me, So I think that's been really key.
I would build on that to say a word of encouragement to the men who are listening to this, who are not young and who have done things well in their life. I would encourage you to not be passive when it comes to passing on those traits. If you're listening to this conversation, we're talking about masculinity, leadership, and the kinds of men that this country needs, that your community needs, and that God needs to see his purposes in this world accomplished. And if you are one of those guys who in your 50s, 60s, 70s, you've lived life well, I would encourage you, please. There are guys like me, I'm in my late 20s, guys like me and younger who are dying to have some genuine mentorship, who would love to have somebody come alongside them and coach them and help them. And it's so important. I'm so grateful for the men in my life who did do that, who did assume that burden of responsibility. And one thing I'll say before I ask a closing question is I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, if you want to, maybe take a step forward, the book that Cole just recommended is a phenomenal book, The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. Every single one of us has experienced pain, shouldering the responsibility of what pain management looks like and how we can keep pain from those we love and find meaning through the pain. That book is phenomenal for that. Another book that I'll recommend is The Warrior Poet Way by John Lovell. Great book. You can find it on audio, and you can find John on YouTube as well. Helps you realize that men are called to be both a lover and a fighter, that God has both of those for you. You should be loving and gentle, and you should be a fierce warrior defending truth and defending what's good at the same time. So those are two excellent opportunities. If you haven't read those, folks, I recommend you listen to them. But Cole, we have time for at least one or two more questions. I want to ask you, if you were sitting down with a 25-year-old guy right now who's trying to figure out life, who recognizes that there are things he's doing wrong, what would you tell him to focus on?
Oh, well, I would start by trying to share some of my own weakness, to try to bridge a gap and kind of lower the fear of shame and disappointment. Because I think we all, especially when we're around other men, we want to project that we've got it figured out, or that we don't need their help, that we're independent, those kind of things. And I would say, to your last point about mentors, I've been very fortunate to have some older men who have done that with me, but they really spoke into my life. I wasn't seeking them out necessarily. I positioned myself near them, but it wasn't so much that I asked them to be my mentor. And I can think with at least a few of those where they led with their weakness, or if they heard just a peek of my weakness, they expounded upon theirs. And I think that's really helpful and masculine to say, I haven't figured it out and I've got it, and let me show you how I've worked through it. But I think if I was talking to that young man, I'd say that would be key. And then also, your you have to nail down your worldview. And if you're just halfway in with, I think I believe this or that, like, that should drive your path forward, I think. And for me, that's my faith in God. And so if I didn't have that, I'd give a completely different answer.
Faith leads all. Cole, it's been so special. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. Yeah. What stands out to me is just the intentionality, not only in building your business, but in building a life, a family, and a community the right way. I think there's a lot that guys can learn from here. Not, again, because you've got everything figured out, but because you're thoughtful about the process. So I'm so grateful for your friendship, and I know this conversation is going to stick with a lot of people. Folks, that was a conversation with Cole Porter from Porter Steel. This is Taylor Hawkins, your host, and thank you for listening to the Marc McMain Show on WMOQ. We'll see you